Okay, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Stacy Whitman, and I am the publisher and founder of Two Books, which is the middle grade and white imprint of Lee and Low Books. And you're all here because you supported our pre-order campaign for the Witch Owl Parliament on Kickstarter. Look at these beautiful books. If you didn't already get your book in the mail, it's on its way if you ordered a print book. And it's been a fascinating way to let new people know about our graphic novels early on. So thank you all for supporting the book, and we're so happy that you're here. Just to give you a sense of the breadth of what we're up to at Lee and Low, here are some of our newest books. Sorry, it's hard to do this on a little screen. Woo, yay! And if you didn't already know, Clockwork Curandera is available in both English and Spanish. So I'll be getting us started by asking the creators to introduce themselves, and then we'll get straight to discussing the making of the book, the making of comics in general. So David Bowles, will you start? And then we'll go to Raul and Stacy and Damien.
Awesome, sounds good. Hey everybody, I'm David Bowles. I am a writer and translator and professor from deep South Texas, from the Rio Grande Valley here on the border with Mexico. Clockwork Curandera is the first graphic novel I ever wrote, but it's the second one I ever published. So I'm super excited about sharing it with you and chatting about it in more detail.
Raul?
Oh, hi. I am, sorry, I am Raul III. I am an author and an illustrator, and I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, and I've lived out here in the Boston area for the past 20 years, which is a long time. And I illustrated this book written by David Bowles with colors by Stacy Robinson and lettering by Damien Duffy. So, Spanish and English, awesome.
And I am Stacy Robinson. I am assistant professor teaching graphic design at the University of Illinois. I am here with Damien Duffy in town. We're in Champaign, Urbana-Champaign. We are not together right now. I am not in his bedroom with him.
A huge disappointment.
Such a disappointment. It'd be so much fun.
That would be hilarious. I would have been great.
I should come over. I could probably be there in 5 minutes, actually.
And then suddenly he pops in through that door behind.
And I am the colorist on the book, and we're going to talk about the coloring process in a little bit, because this was definitely the most interesting coloring process I've ever done, ever. So I'm very excited to talk about that a little bit. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm Damien Duffy. I'm also in Champaign, Illinois. I'm a lecturer at the School of Information Sciences and graphic novelist, and I had the honor of lettering this book in 2 different languages. And I'm alone in my bedroom, and it's kind of sad. Stacy, looking at you.
We're going to work on that.
It'd be a longer trip for her.
We have an hour to work on that.
I'm curious, Damien, to see what Spider-Man cover you have on your t-shirt.
You know, I'm not totally sure which cover it is. It feels like it looks a little John Romita, looks a little Ross Andrew. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Cool. I dig it.
So as you guys can tell, all these guys are comics experts. So we're going to get into a lot of really cool stuff about comics. But first of all, David, I want you to talk about what the book is about. I'm pretty sure, because everybody's a Kickstarter supporter, that they kind of already have an idea, but start there and lead into what the original spark was for this project.
Sure. I mean, so at the heart of the series is this apprentice curandera or healer named Cristina Franco, who at the start of the book is waiting for her brother, who's been studying alchemy abroad, to come back home. They're both orphans and have been raised and have been living for the past 5 years, kind of like on their own, and partly raised by their aunt, who is the mother superior of a monastery in the desert. And as her brother's train arrives, it's attacked by witch owls and witch owls are like or lechuzas are these creatures of Mexican legend and folklore that have their roots in like pre-Columbian Nahua folk tales and legends. And they, as she tries to protect people on the train, and most importantly her brother, she is killed by these creatures and dismembered and so forth. And then her brother brings her back to life. And so at the heart of the series is, why are these witch owls attacking now after more than 100 years of being away from this nation called the Republic of Santander, in which like steampunk technology and like mestizo indigenous magic kind of live side by side? And what is it that they want, and how can they be stopped? And so it's a bit of a mystery, blended with this notion of curandera as a superhero. And that's really what the spark was. I grew up on the border, and like my dad and my grandfather before me, when I was sick with certain types of ailments as a kid, rather than going with a doctor, I'd be taken to a curandera. And there are lots of folk remedies and herbal teas and things that you would be given, but you'd also be massaged in certain ways, or more spiritual things would be done, like being swept with a small broom, or having an egg passed over your body to like treat ailments that were of a non-physical nature. And sometimes like even like getting kind of like counseling from a curandera, because they were pretty great at like trying to help you grapple with love sickness and all kinds of things, right? So when you're a kid on the border, they are like this mysterious kind of like badass group of women that you're kind of afraid of and you kind of admire at the same time. And some of them, especially older ones who are maybe a little bit harsher, can be like awfully scary sometimes. And I just, as I grew up, reading comics and then historietas from Mexico, because like we live on the border with the Mexican state of Tamaulipas, where like a lot of my second cousins live. My great grandmother Beba lived in Reynosa, just across from McAllen, where I grew up. I would buy these little Mexican comics called historietas and read them alongside like Swamp Thing and House of Terror, and as I got older, like the like Vertigo comics and just all this dark DC stuff more than anything else, what I was really interested in. And then eventually manga. I was an early adopter of things like Ghost in the Shell and Battle Angel Alita and stuff like that. I don't know, just in the back of my mind, this weird alchemy, interestingly enough, given that there's so much alchemy in the book, began to happen where a part of me that wanted to do something with curanderas began thinking of what it would be like to have a superhero be a curandera, and then to have her be, frankly, like a cyborg, which is eventually what she ends up being. And so all those lines kind of came together, as often is the case with creativity. And back in 2016, when Stacy Whitman and I were talking about possible projects that I might pitch to two books, I mentioned this, and she was interested in it, and so like I wrote it up. I had like been playing around with it for like several decades, but I finally just wrote up the basic concept of it, and that was the origin of this. And with the help of Raul and fleshing out the world building and the character design and stuff like that, I think we've hit on something like really, really unique, but that's going to also have like a bit of familiar flavor to it in amidst its uniqueness, because visually, in terms of storytelling and lots of things, it is not your normal comic book, but I think that it will connect with people because the characters are very human, and the things that they're facing are things that we can all identify with.
Exactly. Raul, you dedicated the book to your grandmother, I think, correct? Was she a curandera as well?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, she has passed that on to two of her daughters, my tia Ana and I'm sorry, but you guys are all frozen, so I'm hoping you can
We
hear
can
me.
hear you. We can hear you.
My tia Ana and my tia Blanca are both at the Mercado Cuauhtemoc in Juarez, and they are both curanderas. And like David was saying, they a lot of the times they offer just counseling to a lot of people that come through with problems, and they sit down with them and they listen and give advice. But yeah, my abuelita Susana was la mera mera, the curandera of the Mercado Cuauhtemoc in Juarez.
That is so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
My wife's grandmother was a curandera, and I only got to meet her in like the final years of her life. But she was a force to be reckoned with, man. Wow. Yeah. It's really,
Yeah,
really cool.
so was my abuelita, and as a matter of fact, so are my tias. Funny enough, as a kid, I noticed that my tia Blanca was selling magic mushrooms and peyote to people that would come from across the border.
Ándale, ándale.
So
She became way cooler in my eyes after I saw that.
David, you mentioned indigenous magic. You've done a lot of research and writing in general, like not just for the book. What we in the U.S., the culture that we in the U.S. would call the Aztec, which I don't think is the right term for them. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that research impacted the book that you envisioned here and the Nahuatl that you used in the book, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. So the one of the early things that got me interested in it and now and in the people, like you say, that today are often called Aztecs when we're referring to like pre-invasion peoples.
And
But
notice he said it right, I did not.
yeah, well, I mean, it's just when you look at it, you're like, what's that H and what do I do with it? But the HU in Spanish and also in Nahuatl, it just stands for W. So I just always tell people there's no H, it's just a W. But anyway, the Nahuatl speaking people are usually called Nahuas, and there are 2.5 million Nahuas in Mexico today. And interestingly enough, the allies of the Spanish, the Tlaxcalans or Tlaxcalteca, they were invited in the 1500s to settle way north of where they're originally from, which is basically east of Mexico City, to right next to Saltillo. And then from Saltillo in the 1700s, like dozens of those families then settled along the border. They settled in the area that's now Eagle Pass, Piedras Negras, so like where Guadalupe Garcia McCall is from, and then Laredo, and then Reynosa, and all these places. And so they were brought along with like more mestizo people, more like Spanish-speaking blended people to the area to colonize and to pacify the Coahuitecans who lived here. So there were like groups, like bands and tribes of people living along the border, like the Carrizo Come Crudo that still exists today, but also the Tampacuay who were, basically eliminated or absorbed into the population, the Coahuitecos, the same thing happened. And so they came here and they brought, Nahuatl, the language and some of their culture to this area. And so the people, the Mexican American people who have been here for generations, like my dad's side of the family, they are like this blend of Spanish, yes, but also like Nahua, indigenous Nahua, and indigenous Coahuitecan. It's this really interesting combination. And learning that when I was in college is one of the things that made me want to study Nahuatl over time. And so now, I've spent more than a decade studying it, and I do a lot of work translating it from it and so forth. And I mean, that turn of events where one group of indigenous people was used to pacify another is really distressing to me. It's kind of like, it's one of those like dark corners of a very, very dark history of the Mexican American people. And so like part of the things that I wanted to imagine in this alternate world is it was a country, and rather than Mexico being the result of the independence from Spain, there's like 7 different countries, and one of them is Santander, in which indigenous people are allowed to live their ancestral ways without being interfered with, and where there's a lot of immigration and refugees and stuff like that for people who are looking for that, a place where they can like just have their little community and be protected by the government and feel safe or whatever. Which is why, the arrival of this force that begins to abduct refugees and indigenous people becomes really scary. yeah, I definitely wanted to honor the indigenous people whose land this was long before it was New Spain or Mexico or Texas or the U.S. Um, and it allowed me, and my studies of indigenous language allowed me to use indigenous languages in the magical system in the books, right? So I'm taking the curanderismo and like amping it up by making curanderas use like the old words, which are like from different Coahuitecan languages, from mostly from Coahuiteco and Carrizo or Come Crudo, which is they're basically related dialects. And then all the alchemy stuff is in Nahuatl because it's like kind of like an invading language, like kind of like Spanish is as well. And so like here in this scene, you have Enrique, the alchemist, the brother of Cristina, having replaced some of her missing limbs with automaton pieces, bringing her to life with a mixture of engineering and indigenous words. So saying Nikitsawa Moyoliya, I seal up your heart spark. He both injects her with electricity to start her up, but also does an alchemical kind of process to keep her soul trapped inside of her heart, whereas it might otherwise fly away. So, I mean, it was a really interesting kind of balance, trying to find ways to be respectful and super cool at the same time. But you know, I think we have struck a pretty good balance.
I think you did. Hang on, I'm going to stop sharing. And the related to that, we actually our new editor, she was our freelancer, and now she's our full-time editor. Elise McMullen-Chiotti is a Cherokee. She is a member of the Cherokee Nation, and we were talking about how interesting it is that there are a lot of indigenous nations in the US and Mexico that have a thing about owls.
Yeah.
So let's get into the witch owls, are the villains of the piece.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Raul, when you're a kid, would they scare you with stories of lechuzas when you were a kid too?
They sure would.
Yeah.
Yes, and I couldn't wait to draw them in the way I had imagined them in my mind for so many years, you know?
Yeah. I still remember like those first drawings that you submitted when you were like, this is my idea for what I was like, holy shit, it was incredible. It's really good, very menacing and so forth. Because yeah, as a kid, I was
Here, I'll pull that up. Go
sure,
ahead, keep going.
do. As a kid, I was always told, hey, cuidado cuando salgas, be careful when you go out, and don't go out after dark because because we have like we have huge owls on the border. We have huge barn owls and screech owls whose wingspan can be like 6 feet. It's crazy. Like you don't want to like be around when one of them flies overhead. It's a very scary thing.
Yeah.
And we would be told a lot of these owls are actually witches who transform into owls to then, to go around and torment young people. So those are some of those early illustrations that you have up there.
Yeah, I think in that drawing there, I was attempting to kind of do a air to ground transformation.
Yeah.
Remember,
because the whole idea is like in the legends, the witches can like be at different stages of their transformation. So there are stories where like the witch is essentially in human form but with wings, or like the face kind of human on the body of an owl. Lots of different varieties of the story. And I always thought that the way you depicted them was so perfect. Like there's occasions when they look almost completely like an owl, and other times when they basically like scary women with wings.
And you know what I'm loving? I'm loving I'm seeing different cartoonists taking on Kelly Fernandez here in the drawings of lechuzas in her book are pretty awesome. So
I was on a panel with her at New York Comic Con.
Beginning to see more adaptations of them,
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be like vampires, dude. You know how there are like a billion books on vampires and people are so like, let's bring more books on vampires. I want that to be true for lechuzas.
Yeah.
I want there to
Well,
be,
and then there's also Guadalupe. It's not comics, but
yes, that's right. Guadalupe Garcia Macaw and
yeah,
some of the
and
mariposas
some of
has,
Pyrpos. Thank
yeah.
you. I can't talk today. I lost I
Well, so
lost
you were asking me
where I
about to
was.
talk more about lechuzas, and so
Yeah, as far as
yeah,
indigenous beliefs about them. Yeah.
yeah, because so like in the pre-invasion Nahua communities, they also had a very similar belief of the Chichtli, which is like a witch that is in owl form, and the kind of magic that they use to transform themselves was called Chichiotl. And it's kind of a Utah Aztecan thing, because you look at lots of different and well, like maybe more broadly North American indigenous, but definitely you see in almost all Utah Aztecan cultures, from Purepecha, I mean not Purepecha, Tarahumara to like Yaqui to O'odham, Hopi, all these different groups, they have beliefs about witches being able to transform into owls. And it's kind of a thing you see in Europe as well, but there is something just like extra about the indigenous way of looking at it that has to do with like the association of owls with the underworld, and as you know, as messengers of whatever god is in charge of the afterlife and so forth. So yeah, it's I find it fascinating. I think it
Yeah,
was
it's absolutely fascinating. Um, and then Raul, tell us about the style that you chose for the book. What was your inspiration for it?
Well, it's funny because I'm primarily known as like a funny animal artist. So I draw a lot of funny animal books, with starting with Lowriders in Space, and now with the World of Vamos. And with each one of these books, I've really tried to capture um, a different art style that is kind of reflective of the culture that I grew up surrounded by. And so, for instance, in the Lowrider books, I was a big fan of Lowrider magazine and of the fan art that would appear in those books. And so I drew each and every one of those books with Bic ballpoint pens. I loved artwork that was on pañuelos and art and prison art. And so that's why I chose the Bic ballpoint pens. And with Clockwork Curandera, like David, I also read a lot of those historietas. My abuelita also read like these little romance novelas. They were like tiny little comic books, maybe 100, 200 pages thick, and they were full of romance and like sexy men and ladies, you know, and I don't know, she read them like constantly, and they were printed on really cheap newsprint, and they were printed with like sepia inks. And then simultaneously, I've been a huge fan of Jorge Guadalupe Posada, as well as Mania here. And for this book, uh, because of the time period that the book takes place in, I try to kind of work in a style that reflected those cheap romance books that my abuelita would read, combined with the prints of Posada and Mania. And simultaneously, because the book was kind of riffing off of Frankenstein, like for the design of the Clockwork Curandera, I gave her kind of like the Boris Karloff spikes on the hair, just to show that she'd been, also lightning bolts along the side of her cheeks to show that she'd been brought back with a combo of magic and science. And then I try to bring in elements of some of my favorite illustrators like that, like the laboratory is kind of riffing off of Bernie Wrightson's laboratory from his Frankenstein illustrations. And then for the curandera, I was really influenced, and I had been since I was a kid in high school, with Alita Battle Angel. And so I guess the artwork is just kind of a mix of all of these things, and yeah, hope it hope it works out. It worked out nicely, but you know, you're
It's
always
gorgeous.
approaching these things
Yeah.
with like, am I doing it right? What's going on? So
I think it, to me, when I look at it, I feel like I imagine this is like something that could be printed in 1865 in the Republic of Santander. Like this is like what their newspapers look like. This is, you know, this is the kind of artwork that's just really that their political cartoons use or whatever. It feels like it's part of the world building. Like you are immersed in this world. There's not the artificiality of like a really modern, like, you know, Western comic book style,
yeah,
telling a story about an alternate world in the 1800s. So I love it. Yeah.
I'm glad you say that, because that's exactly what I was going for. I wanted it to fit, you know, then as much as it would now. And funny thing though is that this was the first graphic novel that, and actually the first time that I ever created artwork digitally. So all of these pages just exist on the computer. And so simultaneously, I was also experimenting a lot with my approach to making this book, trying out like brushes that I felt resembled the brushes that I was accustomed to using in my real life studio. And so, yeah, I think it looks like, you know, very inky, and like I actually did use a brush. So I'm happy with that.
Absolutely. And that actually is a nice segue into let's talk comics process in general. Stacy came into the process a little bit later, and he did the colors on this, but he's done a lot of different kinds of comics. If you can, oops, I just dropped the pillows that my computer was on. You look up at the top there, that is some art from I Am Alfonso Jones, which is one of the graphic novels we've published that Stacy worked with us on. Can you guys talk about the process of doing the art of a comic? Um, like pencils, inks, colors, what does that look like?
I kind of, you kind of cut off at the last part. You said, what does the process look like? And then what did you say right after that?
Pencils, inks, colors, like talk about the various stages of doing a comic.
So you screen shared a very loose sketchbook drawing, and so that is really the first part of, well, let's go back a little bit. The first part is getting to know what the characters look like. So, you know, there are stages of the process where you're simply designing or filling out your cast, deciding what the characters are going to look like, how they dress, how they hold themselves in the world that you're creating. And then you begin to break down the script, and you start to figure out how to make it work from one page to the next. And you do this very roughly, I guess, very similar to what an animator does when they do a animatic. You're just kind of roughly laying everything out. And then once that happens, you begin the next arduous step of kind of redrawing that entire rough draft and penciling it and making it more detailed, and then inking it. And once the inking is done, fortunately, my part of the job is done, and then it's all up to Stacy and Damien to complete it. So something about comic books, and I think it's something that's very important, is that it's a very collaborative process requiring many different hands.
Stacey, you want to talk about the coloring part of it?
Yeah, and David said, he typed in the chat, it was a very long script, right? So even adapting that more is something that becomes part of the process. I came in, like you stated earlier, I came in a little later in the process, and this was a very different coloring process. A lot more minimal than I've ever colored before. And as Raul stated, Raul and I met, and Raul, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking back like a couple of years. I think he showed me some samples of what you wanted it to look like. Or I think at first we had a conversation about it. Then I did some color samples, and he was like, no, that is not that is not the style that we're coloring this in. And I was, my pride, I'm like, yo, I went in on these colors. These colors are dope. What do you mean this is not the style? I'm like, yo, you feel this, right? This is fresh. And he was like, and then he showed me samples he was talking about, and they were these really minimal prints. Like they were these prints. He was telling me the history of this. And I can't remember, Raul, if you remember the artist, a particular artist.
Yeah, I just held up books by them. I don't know if you saw them, but Mania, Posada and Mania. And something else that I told you, Stacy, was that I wanted this book and the art to look very like we were under a severe deadline, and we needed to get these pages out the door, almost like we were publishing a newspaper. Right. So
right.
I didn't want the coloring to look like it had been worked on too much. I wanted it to be a coffee stained page. Yeah. I love working on coffee stained paper. I'm doing a little sketch right now on coffee stained paper, and just a red and green, basically. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was the process. It was so different than I was used to working. I mean, the book looks incredible. I love. It's so different than what I had originally envisioned. So once I saw the samples and really got it, I even remember when I was coloring it, I was like, this is really simple though. Are you sure this is what you want? Like, this is so simple. I'm like, am I doing a good job on this? And the fact that people like that, I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing a good job, because I'm so used to working a lot more, with a lot more detail. But I love it because I'm a huge fan of printmaking. So I love that process. I love the stained paper. Like the book looks like, I'm looking at it right now. It looks like this book looks old. You know what I mean? That's exactly what I probably shouldn't be smelling it. Like, this book came out like hundreds of years ago, right?
Yeah,
that's
we should have added like a scratch and sniff for like old books like that.
Yeah. Everybody would be sneezing upon reading their book. No, Stacy, you did a great job coloring the book and going along with making the book look like it was created way back in the day. And I think this volume definitely accomplishes that. It takes people on a ride, on a time machine, and sets them right down in the period and right into the story. So thank you.
Yeah, fortunately, thank you, Raul. That means a lot. I appreciate that. And shouts out to Stacy as being a wonderful editor who sends back awesome notes and caught a lot of my coloring mistakes and everything.
I'd also like to point out that Abi Alwar, who is our in-house designer, did a lot of great feedback as well.
Yeah, thank you, Abi. Shouts out to Abi. Absolutely, definitely. And then as I was coloring, these pages were going back to Damien as well, which is typically the process, right? So I want to say, Damien might even, I'm trying to remember, were you lettering before I was coloring at points? So I can't remember if you were lettering.
I think
Let's explain why that is possible, because you guys are
Right.
working on different layers, correct?
yes.
Yes. So talk about that, Damien.
Yeah, so I use primarily Adobe Illustrator to letter, and it's all digital. And to be honest, I was a little worried about the digital lettering looking too new on top of all the other layers of work that we've been talking about. But I hopefully found a good balance between like very legible, but also, not overpowering the art. But anyway, yeah, so it's usually the art will be on a separate layer and the word balloons and lettering on separate layers. So sometimes I'll be lettering rough sketches depending on where the production process is at. With this one, I don't think I lettered too much unfinished art. Maybe towards the end a little bit. And I think the decision to split the story up into multiple volumes came a little later. So I
Yeah.
had a couple of pages that had to be swapped out. Because I was like, I didn't know that at first. So I was very confused. I was like, really, this is the end? That's a strange place to end. There's nothing. But
That's why I hurriedly wrote the very last page.
Yeah,
so
we had to,
get on a cliffhanger.
which yeah, I've had that experience on writing in too. But yeah, so that's sort of the process of it. And then in terms of choosing the fonts, I tried to sort of play with fonts that look somewhat handwritten, and sort of the level of handwritten looking aesthetic of the fonts kind of vacillates between what's being said. So like the magic languages have a much looser, much closer to handwritten style, and I did try to sort of mess with like the leading and kerning a bit to make them a little less regimented.
I love the font that you used for the witch owls. It's pretty awesome.
Oh man, you know what that font's called? It's called COVID Alert. And I was
Holy crap.
right.
That's perfect.
And this is before
2020.
the pandemic ever came.
That was great.
This book went to
yeah.
print last year.
I know. I looked at it, I was like, this seems, it seems
The
like
first time I saw the lettering for the Witch Owl's speech, I was like, damn, yes, absolutely.
That's how
That
they
is what
should
we were
sound,
looking
yeah.
for.
And that,
I'm
No,
flipping
go
through
ahead.
the book. I'm flipping through the book now, and I've got to say the witch owls should definitely win like best supporting actor roles in this book. They really go over the top.
yeah, I was like always scared when they showed up. So I tried to make sure it sounded like something that would, make you jump. And also I did kind of, I was thinking a little bit of like photonovelas in the shape of the word balloons. Because, some old school ones, you see this in Mad Magazine also, where they'd have like the kind of elongated, rounded rectangles with the text
Yeah.
in them. And that worked well too for swapping out English and Spanish because it's a pretty easy to manipulate word balloon shape.
And I love the white background. I think somebody also mentioned in the chat that the white backgrounds make it so much easier to read, and just because it pops out from the rest of the panels. So that's great.
Exactly.
I was just in going back and forth with Stacy Robinson right now in the chat. I'm just reminded that some a little bit of background about the scripts so that people who have backed this project can like learn some of the fun details. So when I wrote the script, I had never written a graphic novel script before. I'd read lots and lots of comics, but there were just certain things that I wasn't taking into account, and about just a lot of stuff about how many words on a page, how many words in a speech balloon, and so forth. And I mean, we
went back and forth.
Stacey
Like
Whitman and I,
we actually tried to count like how many words are on this page. Is that too many? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, early on, I mean, Stacey like loved the story, but it was clear that we were going to have to do some work, and because Raul couldn't really come on board for at least a year, we had some time to work on it. And one of the things that eventually ended up happening is that after getting your editorial letter, Stacey, you'll probably remember, I took out a third of the book and completely rewrote it. So like there were like entire subplots that were dropped and things that were changed. And I think it's a much better book as a result, and that Christina has a much richer background and personal life as a result of that. And then one of the things that we did was just, and we did it, I want to say we like 6 different passes where we just kept cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting. And even then, when
we
Raul
sent
got
it
the
to
text,
Raul, what
like,
did he
there are
say?
too many damn words in these panels. It comes from not being a visual storyteller. From like, I am absolutely like the farthest thing from a visual storyteller. I'm like completely like word driven person. I'm a poet, I just but I think that process like really made me a better writer. We just found ways of saying things that were as just concise and perfect as possible. And then I had to translate all of that nonsense into Spanish.
Well, and let's
which
talk.
is not a language known for its concision.
Yeah. Let's talk real quick about, we talked about the mechanics of the process. Let's talk about the creativity part of making comics. What would you, for somebody who is out there trying to start their own comic, their own graphic novel, what would you advise? Like, for example, how do you change that mindset to a more graphic storytelling if you want to be the writer? If you're the comics artist, what kind of advice do you give to illustrators? If there's somebody out there who wants to be, Raul, you're both a writer and an illustrator. If somebody wants to be a writer and an illustrator, what advice would you give them? This is, anybody can answer.
I'll let someone else take that question.
Well, I mean, Damien's a writer and illustrator, and maybe.
Yeah, I mean, like the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question, Stacey, was just like, do it and do it.
Yeah.
One thing I wish I had realized when I was a younger writer is that the first 3 to 5 things you do will be terrible. Expect them to suck. Do them anyway. And like, don't start with your most perfect idea, or like, don't do it. That's a waste. Like, but definitely just keep going. And then being real, like the discussion of like David, you and Stacey going back and forth and cutting, like cut things a lot, like edit a lot. Editing has always made my work better.
Revision is your friend.
Yeah. I mean, it's painful and awful and stuff, but it's really necessary. So get used to it,
Do you have a comics community that you guys share, not ideas, but like give feedback to each other? Like, especially when you're first starting out, did you have somebody who was giving you feedback on your script or your art? Is that a helpful part? Stacey, you teach.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to go back to writing really quickly. Stephen King, I think it was Stephen King who said in his memoir, it's called On Writing, Stephen King, On Writing. I think he says in that book that writing, 85% of writing is editing. Right. So like you're going to spend a lot of time writing and a lot more time editing. And I find that, even in just writing a lot of academic papers and et cetera, right? It's a lot of editing. Definitely, as Damien said before, just do it. Like it's not going to be the best thing you ever make, and I tell my students that all the time. You got to get your bad ideas out until you get to your good ideas, right? And then in reference to a comic community, absolutely right. I have a thread with some people. I have different threads with different people, like text threads, where we just post work to each other. We share what we're working on. We get feedback. We call each other. And I have different friends I get with for different things. And you need that. I think everyone needs that. Like, no matter how strong of a creator you are, I'm primarily a visual artist. So, and I'm gonna say like Erykah Badu, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. You know what I mean? Like I'm full of pride, but I'm sensitive too, right? And but in that you definitely need to know you need people to bounce really good ideas off of, and everybody needs a community. I don't think it's safe to be, like in the COVID era, like right now, my introvert has totally kicked in. I don't want to get on a plane and go anywhere. I don't want to go out of the house to go to the grocery store. Yeah, I don't want to do anything. And it's just not good to always be alone and in your head. And then you need community. So I think that it's, that at this time, especially, that community is important. And I also want to say that in this time, I tell my students this all the time too, we're in the COVID era and, we're quarantining ourselves, and we're going to emerge from this time. But because we've been here in our history before, in American history, we were here 100 years ago. We were in a time like this. And then we emerged into the roaring 20s, right? And the Harlem Renaissance, and then like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as we emerge from this time, who do we want to be, right? And I think it's important to really think about all those backburning projects that we said, oh, one day we'll get to that. Now is a time where I've been getting to those projects. I've been making the most amazing work that I could possibly make right now. And my community has been really important to me and helping me just kind of, think through a lot of ideas and help me structure my time and figure out what to say yes to, what to say no to. And I'm a person, I like to say yes to everything. And then I get overwhelmed and stressed out, right? So my community
Learning to say no.
Huh?
Learning to say no.
Yeah, like my community helps me, like, Stacey, you cannot do that. Like you got to go up for tenure. Like you got to do that, for example. So I hope I kind of answered that question, but I just want to also be encouraging to think about, even for those who are participating with us today, if you want to write that story, write it. Yeah. It's not going to be it might not be the most genius thing or most unique thing or the best thing you ever do. But it might be the best thing you do to this date, right? And you've got to get to that point before you get to your genius level, magnum opus, whatever, right? You got to get to where you are now. So, and we're getting older, right? So the time to do it is always right now. It is never tomorrow. It is never the perfect time. It is always right here, right now.
Yeah,
I'm done running my mouth.
No, I mean, all those are like brilliant insights. One of the things I'll say to writers is like before I had my first book published when I was 41, I had spent 30 years writing poetry and prose. Writing comic scripts and writing scripts that for TV and film is a completely different genre. And it takes time, it takes practice. Listening to illustrators, if you're just a writer without any kind of artistic, is super important. I've learned so much from Raul and from his friendly and occasionally caustic kind of feedback to some of the things that I was asking him to do. Like, dude, this is not the way a comic works. Cut it out. Has been really great, and has I think I have another graphic novel series with another imprint of Lee and Low that Stacey is also in charge of, called Tales of the Feathered Serpent, and that has benefited enormously from the experience that I've had. I've learned to let panels breathe, to not clutter the story with an excessive amount of plot, and let scenes play themselves out.
The problem that happens is, every single sentence can create, in the illustrator's mind, can create like an entire world. And so if you have too much of that, then you can run into the difficulty of overpowering a page with too much information, when just one descriptive sentence, you could really allow that image to breathe, and the illustrator can just get to work on making that language sing. And for advice to those who want to be authors and illustrators, one thing that I think is important is, for every project that you're going to take on, to understand what shoulders you're standing on. And I explained in the various projects that I am a part of, what I'm referencing, whether it's trying to make a book look like a Posada project or lowrider fan art. Understanding what kind of book you want to make is super important. also go to your local bookstore and if you want to make a picture book, understand that it's 32 pages. If you want to make an early reader, maybe 48 pages, a graphic novel, maybe 112 pages. And that way you're working towards a set number of pages that you need to fill to make that project happen. And then, you know, become a huge fan of all of your past artists and your contemporaries, and your art and the way you create your stories will be in direct conversation with all of these amazing people that you're making work with. Like, I think it's fabulous that David, Juji, and myself all have like a picture book out right now that is about our border experience. And I think it just comes from maybe conversations that we've had, things that we feel we need to communicate about. And yeah, it just comes from being receptive to everything that's happening in this current time.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. We only have a few minutes left. Are there any questions that anybody wants to ask? You can do so in the chat. And just lost my train of thought again. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. I'm always doing that.
Oh,
Drew,
He's been-
Clockwork Curandera here.
he's been sketching while we've been chatting.
That is pretty awesome.
Now, see,
Thanks.
You have got to take a photo of that and send it to us. I love that. That's beautiful.
I will. My phone's charging, but I will soon.
Okay. Question: how long to the next Clockwork Curandera? Stacy.
At least a year.
Yeah.
It's coming though. It's coming.
Robots of the Republic. It's going to be pretty awesome.
That sounds like a song by Devo or something.
I think that like we should. I'll do like a song in the style of Devo for like launch. That'll be great.
Hey, you know what I was thinking, David? It would be. Did you ever watch that movie? It just came out on Netflix called The Old Ways.
Yeah.
We should approach those directors to make a Clockwork Curandera.
I think that would be. I think they would be perfect for the project. I love it. That's a great idea. Stacey Robinson's idea that we have do a craftwork kind of that's awesome. I love that too.
Any
Yeah.
word on the ship date for the book? The rewards have started to ship. Some people have already received their rewards, so hopefully you should be receiving it within the next week or two. I don't know how far. Right now, shipping in the United States, just in general, has just been messed up. So please do be patient because they are going out or have already gone out. But if you don't see your reward within, say, 2 weeks, please do let us know because there might have been something that happened. What was it like to combine conventional publishing and crowdfunding? So that's an interesting question because we actually made the decision as a publisher to do that. So I'm going to take this on real quick. This is something fascinating that Kickstarter has been doing recently that we decided to experiment with actually, is that they've been working with small presses like us to do pre-order campaigns. So we did the crowdfunding as a way of reaching an audience that Kickstarter is in touch with because of all the amazing work that they've been focusing on in creating a comics community there that isn't necessarily there's an overlap, but isn't necessarily all the same people that might find it in a bookstore. And so it was really a lot of fun to reach out to the community on Kickstarter, and I would really like to see that part of it grow. When was the book? The book came out 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so it's been out for a while. So if you want to buy it for gifts for somebody for Christmas, you can find it as well, or any holiday. And the thing that I would like us to round out the panel with is, what do you have coming up next? So I know you guys all have a lot of interesting projects coming up, so let's hear about them.
I have a couple of exhibitions coming up. So I am working on curating some exhibitions. I have a show up right now in Buffalo, New York called Ascension of Black Stillness. It's an Afrofuturism exhibition that is photo-based. It's the first in a series of 3. Hopefully, I'm talking to the director of SIPA Gallery about that. I just have an installation up here in a local community, a CU community, called Future Spaces and Community Places. It's an Afrofuturist collaborative project that I'm working with my collaborator, John Jennings, who works with Damien and I. Also, Kamal Grantham and Shea Robinson are 2 of my other collaborators. I'll be heading to the Smithsonian on November 20th for, I have a piece showing in the Arts and Industry Building, the first museum at the Smithsonian. They are reopening their doors for the 175th anniversary. They've been closed for a few years for renovations, and I have a piece in that exhibition. That exhibition is called Futures. I have a number of, and I'm going to Carnegie Hall next year. I got a piece showing in Carnegie Hall next year, and
Awesome.
it was just announced, and that's another Afrofuturism exhibition that's really awesome. And then I was just kind of announced I'm in negotiations with the Schomburg Center. So Stacey, write down if you are still, no, you don't live by the Schomburg anymore, right?
Yeah, sadly I moved up to Connecticut, so I
That's
used to be
right.
10 blocks away, but I can make it down.
Okay, cool. And then at the same time as the Carnegie Hall exhibition, I have I think a solo exhibition at the Schomburg. So in February too. And then John
So
and I
tell
are
Stacy, tell everybody your Instagram handle so that they can follow when you're
absolutely. I
going to
just
be
threw
doing
that in the
that.
chat. It is
Okay.
Stacey A. Robinson, Stacey A. Robinson on IG. I'm horrible at updating it, but it's there. And yeah, so I'll be around, and John and I are celebrating our 10th anniversary next year with a bunch of events and things that we'll be planning to. We should probably talk to Damien about that, because Damien should be involved with that too. So our 10-year anniversary as Black Kirby, our collaborative duo. Anyway, so that's enough of that. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a lot of great work you're doing.
Working on it. Then I gotta get tenure. So we'll hear about that around May time too. So
I have nothing really.
no, we're working on a project.
Parable of the Sower is out right now. Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower, adapted by myself, drawn by John Jennings, who Stacy also mentioned. And then I have written the script for the sequel, Parable of the Talents, that will come out when John draws it in like 2-3 years. Who knows? It's long. It's a long book. And then yeah, I'm working on a pitch right now for kind of Black Lives Matter magical superhero story called Night Boy that Stacey Robinson over there is supposed to be drawing. John Jennings, I think, is still color. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But
We'll see how that goes. I think so. Yeah.
Man, those sound amazing. That is so freaking awesome. Next year I have the sequel to They Call Me Güero coming out. They call her Fregona. Plus another YA project that hasn't been announced but it's a YA historical novel.
Tell us.
It's called The Prince. It's called The Prince.
Just kidding. You don't have to.
I'll just say the title. It's called The Prince and the Coyote, and there'll be more coming from that. And then, of course, in roughly between a year and a half, books 2 of these 2 graphic novel series of Clockwork Curandera and Tales of the Feathered Serpent should be coming out. Tales of the Feathered Serpent illustrated by my daughter.
Your daughter illustrates one.
Yeah, that she illustrates the Tales of the Feathered Serpent. So can be some more amazing art from her. And I think that's amazingly mostly it, because this year like 12 books come out.
You usually have like 10 books coming out, man.
I know. That's why I said earlier, all the no's that I've begun saying will only begin to be felt like a little bit further down the road. There was Guadalupe Garcia McCall and I have 2 books coming from Bloomsbury too. That was announced early, 2 YA romance novels, YA historical romance / magical realism. Just awesome. Everybody loves Guadalupe Garcia McCall. To it's those are going to be incredible books as well. What about you, Raul? More novel
Well,
stuff?
next month, I collaborated with Jason Reynolds,
That's right.
and we have a book coming out called Stunt Boy in the Meantime. So that comes out the day after my birthday, so November 30th. This month, Vamos, Let's Cross the Bridge was released, which is really awesome. And then next year, there's 4 World of Vamos books coming out, and the 4th Lowrider book coming out. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be
And
your
then,
5-book year.
I'm also working on a Vamos television show with the same people who do Hilda.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What?
And I know one thing I did not add that just popped in my head right now, and I can't believe I didn't think about it, is that Hector Rodriguez and I have started a Latinx comics.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's
Scout.
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So under Scout Comic, we're gonna be rolling out the first 6 titles.
That one, what is it called? Like something
Chispa.
in Acapulco?
Oh yeah, the Attack on Acapulco.
Yeah,
that was our little ash can that we had at New York Comic Con. But yeah, we're rolling out 6 titles for like Alex Segura and Chantel Acevedo are doing a superhero story with us. We've got like just some really amazing
Well,
cool stuff.
if you need any variant covers, let me know.
Ooh, that would be awesome. Yes, that would be awesome.
So as you guys can see, like, this is such a talented team. They've got so many irons in the fire, and I am just so grateful that they were able to all get together, you know, to be able to do this amazing book. We're gonna go ahead and wrap up now because it's time for us to wrap up. But thank you so much, you guys, for coming all together tonight. It's just been so great to chat with you all, and um, if you if you came tonight, thank you for supporting the Kickstarter. We're going to be sending you a video of this later. For anybody who was not able to come tonight, we'll be sending a link to the video for people to be able to see it later. So thank you so much, everybody, and thanks so much to our creators for creating such an amazing book. So thanks and good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
I wish you hadn't been frozen on my screen, but it was good to see you anyhow.
Thanks.
We saw your
Good
lovely
night.
face the entire
everyone.
time, sir.
At least you're all paused in perfect with perfect faces. So that's really nice.
That's great. I love it.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.